All right, everyone, we've got some exciting stuff to get into today. So we have 9 league champions to go through the details of, including what they look like, of course, their skills, descriptions, even their damage multipliers. And these champions are not in the game, and they're also not a part of that batch of champions I went over a few days ago that were considered the Battle Pass Season 2 champions. So these are actually in addition to that. So, of course, with the video like this, first of all, major shout outs to Panda Killer for providing this information to the Raid Shadow Legends community. Credit where credit is due. Make sure you guys check out his channel, show him some support, and if you guys want to, you can say Salt sent you as well. So thank you very much. And also, importantly, I will say that none of this is confirmed. None of this is official. This is, of course, leaked information. So, there is a possibility that some or all of this stuff doesn't actually come to the game. I have to say it as, I guess you could say, a disclaimer, just in case we don't see some of these champions in the future. And I will also say, importantly, this stuff is not 100% new in the sense that there were actually some very preliminary screenshots circulating for a while now. A couple of people talked a little bit about it, but they were very rough. They were not translated. A lot of the skills were incomplete. A lot of the names of the champions were incomplete. Of course, they didn't have damage multipliers. So these images and this information is quite a bit more refined than the stuff that's kind of been out there for a little while now. So let's get into it. And we're going to start off here with a crazy legendary. And she's going to be, I guess you could say, a utility DPS support-based legendary. And man, her second skill is absolutely insane. So this is just what she looks like from the front, what she looks like from behind here, and now getting into her skills. And just like I did for the last video, in the lower left, that number in white, that is going to be the DPS multiplier. So she's going to be, let's see, she says she's support, but her skill is going to be based off of attack. So she has a multiplier of 4.6 on her skill 1. Attacks on enemy places a shield buff equal to 10% of this champion's max HP on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns. And now we get into her second skill, which is just crazy. Attacks to an enemy places a stun debuff for 1 turn, has an 80% chance, and you can see with skill books you can get up to 100, of teaming up with 3 random allies to attack a random enemy. Allies joining the attack will use their default skills. This sounds like somebody, doesn't it? Well, I'll tell you who it actually sounds like. That skill is actually quite similar to Catacomb Counselor and his third ability here, this team rush, right? Army of Death teams up with 3 random allies to attack a single enemy. The allies joining the attack will use their default skills. So there's a couple of key differences between, these versions here. Obviously, the legendary has a stun attached to it as well, which is crazy. But the actual team rush is a random enemy, right? So you don't actually get to choose, but of course, if you're only facing one enemy, then it's still going to attack the enemy anyway. And you can also get this one down to a 3-turn cooldown, where Catacomb Counselor is going to be a 4-turn cooldown. So just an absolute bonkers skill right there. And then you have her third ability here, which has a damage multiplier of 4.4, places a 50% increased attack buff and a 30% increased crit rate buff on all allies for 3 turns, then attacks all enemies. So you've got that double buff, and you also have an AoE attack attached to it as well. And importantly, the buffs are 3 turns. You can get that down to a 4-turn cooldown. So she's a legendary. She only actually has 3 skills in her skill kit, but man, those are some solid skills right there. So crazy champion. Now the next champion I want to get into is actually an epic here, and I looked at his skill kit and I was like, man, this guy reminds me of somebody. This skill kit is awesome, and it's actually going to be a dwarf. So let me pull up the first one here, and this is just an image of what he looks like from the front. You have Runekeeper Dazdirk, and then this is what he looks like from the back there. And now we will get into his skills. So skill 1 here, attacks 1 enemy, has a 35% chance, which you can boost the skill books to 45, of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Now remember, they also buffed leech quite a bit lately, so leech is actually pretty darn good now, based off of defense, and it has a multiplier of 3.3. Next skill here. All right, here we go. Rune of Battle fills the turn meters of all allies by 25% and places a 50% increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. So this is an absolutely crazy skill. I love it. I love this skill. You guys know how much I just like buffs and support on champions in general, but this reminds me of a champion in particular who's kind of the well-known champion for having a skill like this. And of course, very well-known champion, probably one of the most popular rares in the game. That is Apothecary, actually quite similar to his Boon of Speed. Now, of course, the epic is increased attack instead of increased speed, but the epic also gets additional turn meter fill. It's not 15%, his is actually 25%. So Apothecary is a 30% speed buff on all allies for 2 turns, fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%. And same thing with this one here is you can lower the cooldown from 5 turns down to 3 turns, and the Dwarf as well, you can also lower the cooldown down from 5 turns to 3. And then, of course, I wouldn't say he is similar to Apothecary without including a potential heal here, which he does indeed have. So his next ability removes all debuffs from all allies, then heals all allies by 25% of this champion's max HP, places a 15% continuous heal buff for 2 turns on all allies that have had a debuff removed. So this actually has potential to be a pretty darn good heal. Now, interestingly enough, you have to keep in mind that if you go back to this guy's skill 1, his damage is technically based off of defense, right? But then his heal is going to be based off of his maximum HP. So, you know, he's labeled as a support-based champion. In a way, you kind of have to pick and choose between HP and defense. And I'd probably say for this heal specifically, you probably want to focus on more HP because this guy's really going to be more about the support rather than getting some extra DPS on his skill 1. So, you know, if you do build him with a lot of HP, you're going to see some crazy numbers from that heal right there. So, pretty awesome skill. All right, and he also has his aura here, increases ally attack at all battles by 25%. So we've got ourselves a somewhat of a Dwarf Apothecary type champion there. Next up on the list here, let's actually go to another legendary with another crazy skill kit, and actually a mechanic that has some potential for some insane damage. And this was actually the champion teased in Panda Killer's last video here. Just an image from the front there, an image from behind. And now getting into her first skill with a damage multiplier of 2.0. She is an attack-based champion as well. Important to keep that in mind. Attacks 2 times at random. Has a 75% chance of placing a Hex debuff for 5 turns. The debuff cannot be resisted. Each critical hit decreases the cooldown of the Not of This World skill by 1 turn. And we'll actually get to find out what the Not of This World skill is. Also, the Hex can be improved to 100% with skill books as well. It even says that it cannot be resisted. And very important, each critical hit decreases the cooldown of that skill. You guys will see why that's important in a second. Now moving on to the second skill, and this is where you're going to see those insane damage numbers. Attacks all enemies. Damage increases by 50% for each Hex debuff on the enemy team. Stacks up to 300%. This is an AoE as well, and the damage increase is based off of each debuff on the enemy team. So you're going to see some crazy damage from this. It's got a starting multiplier of 3.5 as well. It will remove the Hex. And now we get into the next skill here, which is the Not of This World. And I'll say why this is important here and why that cooldown reduction on the skill 1 was actually important. Places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 3 turns, grants an extra turn. So the fact that this skill grants an extra turn is really, really important. That means that you get to place the perfect veil without essentially eating up this champion's turn. So you're going to get to act anyway. So that means that you use 2 turns whenever, you know, it's your action to use this skill. And that means that it's going to lower the cooldown on the Hex Reaper by quite a bit. So you're going to be able to get off these crazy AoEs a lot. So making sure that you have a lot of crit for this ability here to lower the cooldown on the Not of This World is actually quite important. You're going to be able to really synergize this champion's skill kit very well together to get a crazy combination of achieving some just ridiculous damage. So, and then of course we have the passive as well. Has a 50% chance of placing a True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn when an enemy loses 30% or more of their max HP in a single hit. So additional crowd control to boot, and that 30% max HP or more, probably going to be seeing that a lot with a burst DPS champion like this. So absolutely crazy potential of a legendary here. All right, now moving into the next champion here, we've got ourselves a poison support type HP champion. So we've got Tiktha Black Scale of the Lizardmen's faction. Just an image from the front there, an image from behind. And now getting into the skills. So of course the damage multipliers will be lower because it's an HP based champion. We've got skill 1 here, attacks all enemies, heals by 10% of the damage inflicted. Second ability here, places a shield buff on all allies equal to 20% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. Places a 5% poison debuff on attackers for 1 turn when hit under these shield buffs. So pretty crazy support type skill right there, especially if you're going to be able to activate, if this ends up being a really beefy shield, you'll be able to actually get quite a bit of poisons up on enemies, assuming that they don't just completely obliterate through the shields. Very interesting skill right there. All right, next up here. This champion will receive damage equal to 50% of their max HP. This will happen even if it kills the champion. Then attacks all enemies dealing damage equal to 50% of this champion's HP. Has a 50% chance of placing a sleep debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. This attack always lands as a normal hit. So kind of like a nuke, you self-destruction, do a bunch of damage to yourself, but also has the potential to do a bunch of damage to enemies. Can't be crit, probably because the damage numbers are going to be pretty crazy. You've got that 0.5 multiplier on HP-based champions, which is crazy. So going to see a lot of damage from that. And then you've got the aura, increases ally HP in all battles by 30%. So very interesting champion there. This is a legendary, by the way. All right, next up on the list, we've got ourselves a defensive poisoning champion, and we have Nazamok. He's also a void. All right, so we don't have an image from what he looks like from behind here, but getting into the first skill, got a damage multiplier of 2.5, defense-based. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 25% chance of placing a 2.5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Places an extra hit if the target is under a poison debuff. So really interesting. I mean, we're going to have potential for a lot of poisons, but, I don't know how to feel about it being the weaker version of poison. The good news is the other parts of his skill kit do have the stronger version of poison, but the weak version is on the skill 1. Second ability here, AoE 3.0 multiplier, attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn if the target is under a poison debuff. Places a counterattack buff on this champion. I got excited when I saw counterattack, hoping it would be AoE, but it's just on this champion for 2 turns. And then you've got his third skill here, which does have that 5% poison. When attacked, has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on the attacker. Receives 15% less damage from enemies under a poison debuff. So even additional defensive capabilities from that as well. And finally, you've got his aura here, which is increases ally resistance all battles by 40. All right, next up, we have a support healer epic. We have Crowned Druid here. This is what he looks like from the front. And then what he looks like from behind. And getting into a skill kit, this is going to be a support-based champion. So skill 1 with a damage multiplier of 4.0. Even though he is a support-based champion, his damage multiplier is going to be based off of attack. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 30% chance of increasing the duration of a random buff on a random ally by 1 turn. Then you've got his second ability right here, which does have a heal. Heals all allies by 15% of their max HP. Really important to make sure to take note of whether it's based off of the champions that you're healing's HP, or whether it's based off of the HP of whoever it is casting that ability. So this champion is based off of their max HP, whereas some of the other heals that we looked at were actually based off of the casting champion's HP. And places a shield buff equal to 15% of their max HP on all allies for 2 turns. And then this ability is really cool. I really like the idea of it. Places a perfect veil buff and a 50% increased attack buff for 2 turns on all allies whose attack is higher than their defense. And then you have the other version of it, which is places a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns and a block debuffs buff for 1 turn on all allies whose defense is higher than their attack. So it kind of changes based on what that champion's specialty is going to be. You're either going to get Perfect Veil and increased attack if it's an attack-based champion, or you're going to get an increased defense and block debuffs if it is a defense-based champion. So really interesting. You can kind of, work with the stats of the champions that you have to change one of them to make sure they have higher attack or higher defense so that they get the proper buffs that they are looking for from this ability. All right, and now next up on the list, we are actually going to get into one of the rares here, and it's going to be Inquisitor Shamael. What he looks like from the front, what he looks like from behind, and this guy's skill kit is, I really like it. It's kind of like a, I guess the best way to say it is he's like a utility DPS, where he can do a lot of damage, but you kind of have to work around the way that he does that damage. You're also going to want crit on this guy as well. Attacks one enemy has a 50% chance of decreasing the duration of a random buff on the target by 1 turn. Counterattacks with this skill each time an enemy places a debuff on an ally. Those counterattacks will only deal 50% of the normal damage and cannot be critical. So the counterattacks can't be crit. He's got a damage multiplier of 2.9, attack based. But now let's get into some of the other skills that he has in a skill kit that kind of supports his skill 1 here. So you've got second ability, which has got a multiplier of 2.0 and attacks 3 times, attacks one enemy 3 times, will ignore 25% of the target's defense, will ignore a further 25% of the target's defense for each buff on this champion, places a True Fear debuff on all allies for 1 turn if the attack kills an enemy. So you can get a lot of defense pierce through the skill as well, with the fact that it has a combined multiplier of 2.0 3 times. So you're going to see a lot of potential damage from this ability right here. And then, of course, you've got his passive here, which kind of works around his skill 1. Each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 7.5%. Keep in mind, though, that the counters cannot crit, so you can't go too crazy, but still, that's a lot of extra turn meter that you can get. Whenever an ally receives a Fear or True Fear debuff, this skill will instantly remove the debuff and fill the ally's turn meter by 15%. So in addition to essentially not having to worry about Fear or True Fear from this guy's passive, you're also going to get additional turn meter to this guy if your opponents try to do that as well. So very cool ability, very interesting skill kit. I think this guy's going to have some very fun applications when, if/when he comes out, when people, test around with him a bit. All right, and the last 2 champions that I wanted to end off with are kind of like, more unfinished than the ones that I just showed. We went through 7. We've got 2 more. And these ones, we don't actually have the name of the champion, for example. And some of their skills will read a little bit funny as well. So we have Hero 3910, I guess. What he looks like from the front. What he looks like from behind. And getting into his skills here. Attacks 1 enemy 1 time. He is an attack-based champion as well. Important to keep that in mind because the next part of his skills heals self for 10% of max HP. Grants an extra turn if the target is killed. He's got a multiplier of 3.3 on this ability. So even though he's an attack-based champion, you'll see through other parts of the skill kit, you probably still want to focus on getting HP as well because of the way that his other skills work. All right, next up, we've got attacks all enemies 1 time, damages self for 50% HP. It can kill the producer himself. Places 2 continuous heal, 15% buffs on self for 2 turns. And of course, this skill is based off of attack and also HP. So you've got the 3.2 attack multiplier, and then of course the 50%, which is 0.5 HP multiplier by damaging himself. We've got his third ability here, damages self for 50% HP. This can't kill the producer. Even HP with an enemy doesn't work on bosses. So I'm guessing this is an equalized type ability. I'm not really too sure. The wording on these champions is a little bit different, of course, because they're more unfinished than the other ones. So it does grant an extra turn, though. All right, and then, of course, his passive here, which is revive self with 50% HP and full stamina. I'm guessing that's full turn meter. If this hero is the only one dead in the team, Works only if the team contains 4 or more heroes. Very interesting right there. That's definitely going to have some fun applications if the skill comes out, similar to the way that it's posted right now. And no information about his aura. So last up on the list here, we have Hero 3660, Void Epic. What he looks like from the front, what he looks like from behind. And getting into his skill 1 here, multiplier of 2.3, attack-based. Attacks all enemies with 1 hit, places a bomb with 50% chance for 3 turns. Next ability, places increased attack 2, which is the strong version. The increased attack 1 is the 25% one. For 3 turns, grants an additional turn, and also detonates all bombs. So he takes an additional turn from this as well. So using this ability, essentially it doesn't just use up his turn. He gets to act again, which is nice. You got his 3rd skill here, attacks a single enemy with 1 hit, places a stun for 2 turns, with an attack multiplier of 5.8 as well. And to end it all off here, you've got his aura, increases ally attack in the arena by 32%. So that was a lot of stuff to get into. Crazy potential. I mean, some of these champions are insane. I really like the Dwarf Apothecary type champion. Also the legendaries, the first one that I showed, and also the Angel. Man, there's going to be some crazy potential if these champions come out similar to the way that they are listed right now. But of course, none of this is official. This is all unofficial, so, things could definitely change by then. But, here's all the info anyway. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Once again, major shout out to Panda Killer for providing the refined information here. Feel free to check out his channel, leave a link in the description, show him some support, and that is going to be it for today. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. If you did enjoy the video and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a quick like as well. It means more than you can imagine. And more Raid, Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, all that fun stuff should be popping up on the screen right about now. Feel free to check them out. But if not, until next time, take care, everyone. And this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.